We've got the bond update and speakers. So are we going to have the speakers speak? Okay. First speaker, Chris Hannon.
Is it afternoon yet? Okay, let's do it morning. Good morning, honorable board. My name is Chris Hannon with the Los Angeles Orange County's Building and Construction Trades Council. We're currently negotiating a community workforce agreement or project labor agreement with the district that would bring access to a skilled and trained workforce to the contractors currently working on the district's modernization program. One of the things that's been asked of us in negotiations is to create maximum opportunities for Long Beach Unified students, which we're open to, and we're currently collaborating with your staff in the agreement to make sure that we maximize opportunities for the students. One thing I did come across in glancing over the report on the bond program was there was an increased cost on there. And, I find it very hard to justify an increased cost. There's a lot of factors that lead to the cost of your product in construction. And simply by adding a skilled and trained workforce and access to the best trained construction membership in the world, most certainly doesn't do that. In the agreement that we're currently negotiating, Article 5, under wages, all employees covered by this agreement shall be classified in accordance with work performed and paid by the contractors. The hourly wage rates for those classifications in compliance with the applicable prevailing wage rate determination established pursuant to applicable law. If a prevailing wage rate increases under law, the contractor shall pay that rate as of its effective date under the law. You're required to pay prevailing wage. Access to the union halls, whether they be apprentice or journey level, they're prevailing wage. There's not a penny more in there for contractors accessing this skilled and trained workforce. At Long Beach, we've been looking after some of the projects at Long Beach, and in monitoring some of those projects, we come across almost $3.1 million in wage and hour penalties. I know that the staff's going to come up and say that's in the past, but when I look through your current list of contractors that are approved to do work at the district, I come across Murillo Construction. I come across Pub Construction. Pub Construction had a civil wage and penalty assessment of $313,000. And it's difficult for the district to say that, we didn't know about this infraction because it happened on a Long Beach Unified school site. Murillo, their wage and hour assessment, it happened on a Long Beach Unified site as well. So it's very difficult to say that, the contractors, to the new policy, there's going to be, no cheating of the workers. So it's difficult for us to see how an increased cost, and it's actually insulting to me as somebody that went through a 5-year apprenticeship to get better trained, to get a better education in my craft would be less productive than somebody that didn't have access to a well-rounded training program. And, by increasing the supply of labor to the district, 140,000 members and 15,000 which apprentices, it's hard to justify any increase in cost.
Chris, thank you. Thank you much. Tommy Faber.
I have some documents here
Okay.
for some different experiences on project labor agreements, some studies, and all the apprenticeship programs that the contractors have access to.
Good morning, Board of Trustees and the Superintendent and staff. My name is Tommy Falvai. I represent IBEW, Electrical Workers, Local 11, And I'm here to keep the process going with the negotiations with the staff and LA Orange County Building Trades Council. We feel that with this agreement, when it comes back to the board, that'll be a bigger and better agreement, just like what the superintendent mentioned on the last meeting. But we want to make sure that all the provisions and everything is adhered to when negotiating a project labor agreement. Currently, right now, through our apprenticeship program, we're at 2,200 apprentices that are currently going through apprenticeship program. We started this year, 2019, at 1,600, so that number grew dramatically. Currently, right now, we have close to 12,500 members that are electricians in LA County. We look forward to working closely with the Long Beach Unified School District on projects in the near future. And when this PLA comes back to the board, we will be in support of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy. Dave Everett? Dave Everett?
Hi, thanks for the time. My name's Dave Everett, and I'm here representing the Coalition for Fair Employment in Construction, otherwise known as CFEC. Formed 21 years ago to oppose project labor agreements, CFEC seeks to educate public officials considering PLAs why that'd be a terrible idea. As you take up this issue, please consider the following. Project labor agreements are banned in 24 states. 11 entities in California have done the same thing. Why? Because in California's case, they implicitly and explicitly discriminate against 85% of the workforce who are union-free. 85% of the workforce is union-free, and you're going to exclude them. PLAs create barriers for local, minority, and women-owned construction employers and their employees from participating in building their community, because PLAs contain provisions that do not allow for the full utilization of their own workforce. And PLAs force union-free workers to pay into a union pension plan that they will never vest in. They're paying into a plan they will never see a benefit from. That's wage theft. CFEC sent all of you a more detailed breakdown via email in case you want to see how much this wage theft hurts each employee. Furthermore, studies show that these type of agreements increase project cost anywhere from 10 to 30% above prevailing wage. 10 to 30% above prevailing wage. Because they restrict competition. It levels the playing field and local money is invested. Open competition is healthy and it increases quality. It levels the playing field and local money is invested into the community. With the construction market so busy right now and with more work than workers, why would you do anything that makes it less likely you'll attract bidders? If you want to see what this means in real life, we emailed you an example from the city of Selma just last month, so very current, very real world. Their new police station was supposed to have been awarded already, but despite having 10 pre-qualified bidders, only one ended up bidding the project. Why? As you can see from the documents we emailed each of you, the Selma staff said, and they laid the blame squarely at the feet of the PLA. So finally, PLAs exclude the men, women, and veterans who have chosen to enter into a state-approved unilateral apprenticeship training program in pursuit of a construction career from the opportunity to work and gain invaluable on-the-job training experience that provides stability for them, their families, and their community. For these reasons, we ask that you keep your bond work open for all to work on. Regarding the PLA, consider the following. Why not continue to bid your work with fair and open competition? What problems exist that the PLA is a remedy to? I would submit that there are none. Hold a study session on the issue of PLAs where both sides are allowed to fully present their sides. Survey contractors who do work for you and ask them. When San Jose Unified and East Bay Municipal did this, they found out that they would receive 50% fewer bidders.
Mr. Everett?
Out of time?
Your time's up.
All right, thanks so much. Please do not approve a PLA. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll now have the presentation on the bond program update.
Members of the board, Superintendent Steinhauser, staff, and audience, thank you for allowing us the time this morning and afternoon, right, to present this information. We've put together really a three-part presentation for you. I'll be taking the first part, David Miranda, Executive Director of Facilities and Planning. Really the part I'm handling is our building program update. Some lessons learned, some previous projects, some active projects, and projects that are coming forward. Up next would be Brooke Murray. She's going to address educational specifications and a general update in that regard. Batting third will then be Alan Rising, our Business Services Administrator, and he's going to jump into the topic of project labor agreements. So I always want to start off our presentations with projects that we've recently completed, and there's been quite a few, right? So here we highlight 11 of those, HVAC and modernization type work across the entire district. While the projects are complete, I won't list every one of them, right? They're up there for reference sake. While they're complete in terms of physical work and physical construction, there's still certain things we're doing out there, specifically seeking feedback, right? So there's a tool we use at our disposal, an online tool called Thought Exchange. We're out there regularly seeking feedback from our end users, right? So our school site folks, whether they're teaching staff, clerical staff, school site administration, they lend input because they live these sites day in and day out, all day, every day. So we're seeking their feedback. They are providing it, which is pretty interesting. A number of these meetings have taken place already, but all of them are scheduled and in the books for the next month or two. Other projects that have been completed, there we have a few of the highlights, new construction projects over at Poly and Sato, field projects, and then of course our security improvements that are just an ongoing effort. In terms of our electronic visitor screening system, right, EVSS, 56 projects, 56 schools that are 100% complete, 14 projects that are just pending training before we turn them over, and just a few sites where we're pending fencing work and whatnot before we kickstart those as well. So again, everything's proceeding at a really good pace and positively received. Program successes, right? So these are the highlights. You've seen some of these blurbs and numbers in the past. Very impactful, right? Numbers speak for themselves. They're high volume, impacting a ton of students. I've had the opportunity as being one of the newbies to the district to tour a number of sites, right? So in my first month, and I took stock, how many have I hit? It was 19 in that first month, which was a decent dent, I would say. Really what I saw was that impact firsthand. Smiling faces, students going to and from spaces. I talked to a few teachers who were just ecstatic with their new building space as well. Some who are very excited for what's to come as well. There was one moment in particular, I was walking with our builders, and there was a first grade class, I want to say, who was kind of stepping out, starting to line up for lunch, and they saw us coming. They're all waving and acknowledging us, saying, "Hey, construction guys, it's great to see you." One of the little gals went up to one of the gals from our construction team, gave her a big hug. I thought, now that's an impact, right? So it was just great to see firsthand. Active work, quite a bit in the works as well, right? So Alvarado, Bigsby, Naples, all in the works right now and all slightly ahead of schedule. So we're really in good pace in terms of construction activities at each of those respective projects. We have quite a few projects that are getting ready for a winter break turnover, right? Or move-ins, as we call them. So Mirror Phase 1, we're really working towards and working really hard towards a winter break move and a transition into the next phase. At Lakewood, a number of buildings that are really gearing up and prepping for a winter move as well. And same goes with Jordan in terms of their classroom buildings, the 2 new core classroom buildings, as well as their administration building. So all the projects are lining up well for winter moves. We're doing a ton of work on the back end, and we'll be ready to go. I didn't highlight Milliken Building. That was another project I toured that is progressing very well. Milliken, in terms of their new building, they're slated for a summer transition and turnover, and we're very much on track to do that as well. And then lastly, what's next, right? So talked about what we've done, talked about what we're doing. This is what's slated for next summer. So the bulk of these projects, if not all of them, are in the bid phase, right? So we've secured state architect approvals. We have completed our designs, really out there securing bids at this point in time. The other piece we're working on actively is setting up community meetings at every one of these sites, right? We want to make sure we engage with our stakeholders. They have a chance to chime in and hear what's going on and what's coming forward for their schools. And that's very much in the works right now as well. With that, I'm actually going to have Brooke start to work her way up here. So I highlighted a number of projects, right? Brooke and her team were really in charge of the planning efforts for every one of those projects you saw up there, in addition to this next piece she's going to speak to, which is the ed specs.
Good afternoon, Board. I'm Brooke Murray. As he mentioned, I'm the Administrator of Planning for the Facilities Department. Along with all the planning for the HVAC projects that we've been working on, we're also doing program planning. And one of the pieces I spoke back in March about was the educational specifications that we've been working on. I'm just going to recap so we can go over what the ed specs are again. And the ed specs are a document that we use in facilities that allows the educational side to give us an idea of what they want the spaces to look like, how they want to use them, organization adjacencies, and so forth. So the question comes, why do we need the educational specifications? If we don't know what the educational side needs, our designs and planning are not necessarily the most thoughtful projects. So we use the educational specifications as a tool to be able to articulate and talk together as what the needs are for the curriculum side moving forward. Also, it also allows us to understand what the kids need. It's not just the educational leaders, but it's what the kids need as well. So I'll get into how we involve them. And then lastly, it's a code requirement for us to put together this document. So where are we at in the process? Last time in March I had talked, we were just gearing up and getting started. So now we've actually gone through the process, and we established a steering committee. With the steering committee, their first goal was to set up guiding principles on what they wanted. And some of the guiding principles that they identified were equity, adaptability, comfort, purposeful, thoughtful, technology, collaboration, welcoming, safe, and healthy. Those were kind of the buzzwords that we continuously heard with the steering committee. Once we've established the steering committee, went through the guiding principles, we then broke out into focus groups. So we met with 19 different focus groups that were primarily focused on what their piece of the ed specs were. So we met with, for nutrition services, we talked about what the kitchen should look like, how the cafeteria space should function. We met with the various level offices to understand the sizes of the classrooms in those spaces. Safety and security, we talked with the school safety to understand what their needs and wants were. And then, we went on to transportation and the other various departments. So we broke out, and it was 19 different groups. It took us a while to get through everybody, and then to take all that feedback and bring it back and try to mesh it all together to make it one document to understand. We also looked at some of our schools that we have built in the past, like McBride, Newcomb, Roosevelt, and Lindsay, and looked at those buildings, what were the successes of those spaces, because that was based on our old spec, and then how can we improve upon that moving forward. And then lastly, the most important part, we went out and did surveys with the students. And when we did the surveys, the children provided us feedback on what they thought, their school spaces should look like. They've been in these classrooms for a long time. Some of them have now been moved to new spaces, and they can give us feedback on how we can improve upon what we can do in our ed specs. So what takeaways did we come away with? Well, we came away with that the standard spaces, the sizes should accommodate collaboration. That was the big part that we talked about, how the kids can integrate and work together. For office spaces, we looked at how can we create comfortable and welcoming spaces. So we're going back to those buzzwords that were the steering committee that we established at the beginning. Also for the support spaces, we looked at purposeful kitchen spaces. How can we get kids in and get them lunch and be quick and purposeful and thoughtful with that? For exterior playgrounds and athletic fields, how can we make it welcoming for not only our students but our communities as well to come and use these spaces? We looked at our restroom spaces, we looked at relationships and adjacencies, and we looked at furniture flexibility and all of those parts of the pieces. So a lot of information and feedback that we took away from these groups. So what are the next steps for us? The next steps are for board approval of this document on January 22nd at the board meeting. Once you have blessed the document, then we're going to look to implement this, and there are spaces that are going to change. Things are going to change moving forward in the future, so it's going to require some training, and we're going to start creating a common language between the educational and the facility side so we can understand that these spaces we're building are spaces that are utilized in the way that they have fed information to us. We're going to go back for user feedback because the ed specs to me are not a document that is stagnant and we should just come back every 5 years and address. To me, it's a document that needs continuous improvement, just like how education is continuing to improve. And then lastly, this will feed into our master plan so that now we know the size of spaces, the adjacency of spaces, and we can interrelate all of that into the master plan moving forward for our update in the future.
I have a question for you. Notice the shift in the classroom furniture from the straight tables to tables where students are working in groups. Were students able to give you feedback on that kind of configuration in the classroom? And if so, what was it?
Currently, our furniture it's the triangle-shaped tables. So
Right.
they're already doing the collaborative learning on the current furniture that we have. We have done some test pilots with furniture at some of the schools, and we've also gone out to some of the school sites where teachers took it upon themselves to kind of create the collaborative learning. And the feedback from the students has been a lot about collaboration. They want that. They need to learn from each other. That's what they've provided us.
I may have missed this. Quick question on the facilities master plan revision. So does the plan get updated every so often, or is it ongoing revision to the master plan?
So the master plan, I believe, is every 5 years, and we're working on it right now. Just with being fed information from the ed specs, the classroom sizes are the same, so that changes the building sizes ultimately moving
Right.
forward.
And I was just curious because since you said the ed specs get revised on an ongoing basis, that we have that 5-year sort of window to take learnings and then incorporate them in the master plan, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alan.
Okay, thank you. President Williams, board members, staff, Superintendent Steinhauser. So today we're going to talk a little bit, continue our conversations about project labor agreements. So just to kind of form the conversation, some activities that we've conducted to date. Going back all the way to November of 2018, we began conversations with the board, really taking a deep dive look into some factors that we've been dealing with related to cost escalation and industry-wide issues with worker availability, which are having cost increases on our projects as we looked at tracking at that time, which was double-digit increases in cost per year that we're tracking industry-wide, and looking at some of the reasons that those cost increases and issues were coming at us, specifically as it pertains to contractor risk evaluation. A lot of what contractors do is manage risk. They put numbers to it. They put dollars to be able to manage what they at least interpret to be the risk associated with the performance of the work, and how we can be a factor of that and actually work towards those risks. We moved forward into March of 2019, where we took a look at our community and workforce program, the availability of local workforce. We looked at our community hire goals, which I will say, I put it up there, that we are now hovering just a little bit over 20%. That is approximately a 300% increase from when we started back in April of 2018. So we're very, very happy with some of the efforts that we've been able to put in and the ability to generate local workforce. That equates to approximately 2,100 workers from our local community right here within the zip codes that Long Beach Unified represents that are currently working or have worked on our projects in the recent past. So we're very proud of that. We also began in March of 2019 to talk about some basic concepts and introductions towards project labor agreements. Kind of setting the priorities and setting the processes for moving forward. We had somewhat of a high-level discussion related to PLAs, and we talked with the board about beginning that process of engaging with our union partners to be able to move that project agreement forward. Then in August of 2019, we came back. We had some discussions with our partners and the different both trade partners, the contractors that work with us, as well as our union partners, to come back and talk with the board a little bit about goals and options that were available to the board related to PLAs and what we could do with those PLA agreements. We talked a lot about the advantages and disadvantages related to PLAs, and there are, I believe, some on both sides. There are very clear student opportunity advantages that we can add into our PLA, and we have done a lot of that. I'll talk about that in a moment. But there are some disadvantages. I think one speaker just talked a little bit about some of those. In our research with other agencies that use PLAs, there are some challenges, especially in a very active market and a very hot market, that PLAs could potentially cause some increased cost, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. And then we also came up with a set of recommendations to the board to be able to move forward in the adaptation of the PLA agreement back in August. So as a refresher, these are those recommendations that we came up with back in August. Quickly, they were really looking at projects that were funded from bond funds. At that time, we recommended the larger threshold of projects of $20 million and greater. We wanted to establish a local hire goal, essentially doubling what we had been able to do ourselves. We were, again, hovering right around 20%, so we put a goal out there of going up to 40% local hire. We established student hire goals. We established the goal of having priority access for our Long Beach students to be able to get into the apprenticeship program, establishing an apprenticeship coordinator that was funded by the unions, that we would look at this as a pilot, so that we would establish a 5-year pilot so that we could look at how this would improve our program and provide access to skilled workers and those type of things. We would establish a scholarship program for some of our more disadvantaged students that are trying to get into the unions and earn a good union job, to be able to kind of help remove some of those obstacles that might be in the way. And then also we talked about establishing a district, a Long Beach Unified School District apprenticeship program for our own workers, the folks that actually service our schools on a daily basis. Those were the recommendations established back then. So since then, we've had quite a bit of progress. We've actually had some very, very collaborative meetings with our union partners. We've met we've had actual sit-down discussions, long meetings, where we've sat down on 2 different occasions to really go over some of the terms. And I will say they've been very fruitful. They've been very good conversations with our discussions. Mr. Han is in the room today and talked a little bit about that, and we've had some great work there. We also reached out to some of those non-union organizations, right? Those other folks that may have alternative perspectives, because I think we can learn some issues from those other groups as well. We had conversations in addition to that with contractors, folks that we're currently working with, and also folks that are working on PLAs around the state and around the Southern California region, to get their perspective based upon the real life experience of impacts or considerations that they may have. We also discussed with other districts, other agencies that are using PLAs, and what their perspectives are related to how a PLA is applied, and what maybe some inside information is about what they're experiencing. We looked at our friends here locally, because it's nothing like our neighbors, which is Long Beach City College, and what they're doing with their PLA. We looked at others like even further out, like Central California, Sacramento City, those type of PLAs, about what's happening up in other parts of the state. And we've shared some draft revisions back and forth. I think we're on revision number 3, back and forth between us and the unions as we've moved through some of those negotiations. And of course, we've had counsel review. We brought our legal counsel in to make sure that we're following all the applicable laws and all the different requirements to be able to ensure that we're following the right track. In fact, I've brought our legal counsel with us today in case I need to phone a friend. So he'll be right behind me. So I'm happy to report on our negotiations. Again, these are just a subset of those same recommendations. Lots of green check boxes there. We've been able to come to a lot of agreements, and we've been able to meet largely all of the requirements that the district has set out as goals for the PLA. We do have one little exception there at the bottom, that we really ran into some challenges related to just the differing coverages of the different labor groups. Our labor groups are actually represented by CSEA, and so when you talk about building trades, we do have some different kind of representation challenges there. So it doesn't look like we're going to really be able to establish like a formal apprenticeship program there, but we have some options that we're being able to look through that will probably be outside of the PLA agreement, as we look to how we can help our own folks and be able to attract some folks to come and work for the district in our maintenance department. So that's the one problem where we did find a little bit of challenges there. Other than that, we've really been able to make a lot of progress here in establishing how we can move forward with the agreement.
Alan, before you go on, especially this is really for those who will be watching this later, I think it's important. So if you go to the, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the 6th item down, the coordinator for the apprenticeships, could you just give some detail of what that would entail? Well, why we're so interested in that part of it?
Yes, yes. So one of the concerns is being able to get the message out to our youths. You know, we have graduating students every year, and many of those have the opportunity to be able to go to a 4-year school to get a furthering college education. But we do have a certain percentage of our children in a district that don't have that opportunity because potentially that's just not in their skill set. That's just not the direction that life has them going in, and be able to have the opportunities to move into a construction job, which is speaking personally has been a great opportunity for me. And really, who is that person in the district working with our Long Beach Call office, working with our high school office? Who is that person that is actually meeting with students and giving them the real life perspective? To be able to talk to them about what they need to do and how they need to prepare themselves while they're in high school so that they can be the best prepared for entering into a apprenticeship program. A lot of folks are very, very talented, and they would make great construction individuals if given that right kind of that push or given that right kind of perspective to be able to get into those kind of jobs. And then after a short period of time, 4 to 5 years, they turn out as a journeyman level employee, and they're making quite a great living, and they're working right here in the community on projects that have impact to our students and children. So really this coordinator is really meant to work with our high school office and our Long Beach Call office to get the message out to our students that there are opportunities that may exist beyond a 4-year college.
And this is really important because this really ties directly into our mission of college and career. And if you remember, we have multiple college advisors who do a fabulous job. You've heard them before. We have our job developers that you heard recently that are in our high schools, in our career centers. So this is just part of that thread that would bring all that together that we don't have right now, to be very honest with you. And that was one of our big asks of our partners, that we wanted to be as you heard one of our speakers say earlier, we wanted to be the model PLA if we go down that path. So I appreciate everyone buying into this process.
Mr. Superintendent, on that note, as a part of that, I think it's also important for us to be cognizant that it's college and
Correct.
career, right? And also in how we message this to both our community members and students, that this isn't a different skill set inherently, right?
Exactly.
We're looking for critical thinking skills. We're looking for problem solvers. We're looking for collaborative approaches so that these skill sets are not mutually exclusive of each other. We're training 21st century, highly valued graduates, right? So I would just ask us to be very cognizant that this isn't a secondary path for
Absolutely.
students.
And with opportunities for advancement.
Correct.
Alan's an example.
Correct.
So it was pretty exciting, because I don't know of anybody else, and correct me if I'm wrong, because we don't want to give out false facts, of people who are doing this piece of it.
Yeah, I'm not aware of, I believe that LA has some coordinators that work in their PLA program as well, but this is the first time I've seen it kind of in this format on a PLA. And I got to hand it to our union partners. They've been very amicable to this. They've been very agreeable to this. This has not been an item of an issue. They understand that in order to meet some of their training goals, they also need to have additional students and apprentices coming into the program. And as more work comes into the program, they obviously need more individuals coming in. So it's been a really great conversation with them on how we can.
And correct, and as you said, Dr. Benitez, by it being tied to the high school office in Long Beach College, that true integration of its all.
That's right.
Alan, on that last piece, the last one with the X, red X, could you provide a little detail on what that encompasses? What is that? What are we referring to here?
Yes, the goal there was to help the district manage through the challenges that we have to attract workers to work for our maintenance division and for some of our own service providers that we provide. We've been talking in the district for a period of time about establishing some sort of a training program internally to create opportunities for folks to learn trades, to become carpenters, electrician, HVAC fitters, those kinds of things that we use on a daily basis to service our schools. And it's very difficult, especially in a hot market. It's much more lucrative currently to work on construction projects on the outside than it is to necessarily work with the district. So we've been looking at opportunities. This was really something that we put there to talk with the unions about creating an apprenticeship program where we in the district would have apprentices that were sponsored by the unions. The challenge, though, is that we really have two different union representations. We have CSEA that represent our folks versus the Building Trades Council, which represents construction industries and those type of things. So it's kind of a little bit of a situation where we have two different representations. So we have some discussions that we've had about how we can still continue to work down that path, but it will be happening outside of the PLA.
Okay. Thank you, Alan.
Okay, no problem. So I will move forward real quick with the next topic, which is really as we take a dive into the applicability of the PLA, of what projects would the PLA be applicable to. We originally established a $20 million threshold. That was our recommendation as we go forward, and there is some rationale behind why we would look at that. It really comes back down to the concerns about the cost increases related to PLA, and we've heard a couple of different testimonies here today from public comment about whether or not there's a cost increase. Everyone that we've spoken with, all the districts that we've spoken with, have all talked about some cost increases, and what those are very, very hard to establish, and they're very, very hard to establish the reason for why they are. There's a lot of influences happening in the industry now because it's a very hot market. But ultimately, PLAs have been shown to have a limited bidder pool. There are other options for bidders that don't have to deal with some of the additional requirements of a PLA. Whether that's direct or inferred, the general feeling when we talk with our contractors is there's a reluctance or a resistance to engage with PLAs when there's options that are available that are not part of the PLA. We'll work with them to kind of get over some of those, but there would be a general reluctance to that. So anytime we have a limited bidder pool, that results in less coverage, which results in higher prices. Project competition is super busy out there. As I said, they have opportunities elsewhere. So when we start beginning the conversation about PLAs, the initial response to most folks that aren't union signatory already is a certain level of resistance. And there will be an additional administrative cost that will be there, and that will add just a very few percentage to the cost, both at the contractor's level to be able to take care of some of the requirements of the PLA, but also on the district level as well to be able to do that. We talked earlier when I first began this about a discussion about what the factors of increasing costs in construction, and one of the big ones is risk. Whether it's real risk or whether it's the perception of risk, currently there is a perception, at least with a lot of the contractors that we work with, that when PLAs come in that there will be an additional burden. So because of that risk or that fear, they are adding some pricing to that, which has that general tendency to increase the costs. You know, when I looked at it, I was trying to be very, very conservative. You've heard some folks here that quoted some numbers, but some of the numbers that we're looking at now is about 8 to 18%. And we can discuss what those values are, whether they're high, low, or they're in between. But there is a value that comes with adding a PLA to a program. And a lot of those variables are hard to track. A lot of those are just perceptions of risk, and a lot of those are based on, again, that administrative burden and other things that we've heard about. And it's really, we tried to pick some conservative numbers. Project increases do tend to increase as projects get smaller. You have those smaller contractors that are more local, those smaller guys, and when you start adding additional burden to them, it does become a little bit of a concern, and they do tend to raise their values even more as projects get smaller. So as we move forward, just kind of look at, again, putting it in perspective as we look at the potential financial impacts that could come from a PLA.
Alan, before you get to that,
Sure.
question about the sort of the areas of potential cost increase. I think it would be good if we could, in the next iteration of whatever is presented, if we could have some evidence of the range of things that you're talking about. So for example, I understand that there's perception, right? But if we can't qualify or quantify perception, then I think it becomes difficult for us to, evaluate whether it's 8% or 18%. So if we could separate out sort of those real costs, whether they're inherently administrative or what have you, just to provide evidence for us one way or another, right? To make a more informed decision. But I think the other piece of this, and I looked through the bullet points, one of the things that might be missing here, and you may speak to it, is the rationale here is part of it, of the issue that we have right now as a district, and it's not unique to us, but we have it, is that we have a shortage of skilled labor, all right? You remember, I would ask you every quarter, so Alan, take us why these projects are costing us more than what we originally anticipated. And a big part of that was labor costs, right? I think intuitively for us as a district, and I'll talk more about why my preference is calling it a community workforce development agreement, is we're emphasizing building the pool of labor here. That's it's not unique to us, but that's a high point of emphasis, that we're addressing the labor shortage by creating our own pipeline, right? And so if we're emphasizing the student, and then I love the student disadvantage piece, that this is a workforce development strategy that we're utilizing. And so if we're gonna have in the agreement an apprenticeship coordinator, all of that stuff emphasizes the community workforce development piece. And so if we're gonna have perceptions about perceived labor costs, there's added benefit here that we're not projecting out. If we're creating our own labor supply here in partnership with the unions, I think we have to account for that, because if we're gonna use ranges like 8% and 18%, and I'm not saying they're wrong, I just like to see evidence of that, then we also have to presume there's gonna be cost savings, short-term and then possibly long-term, depending on the scope and scale of this, if we are creating our own labor supply to address the big burden here is the shortage of labor, right? So whether that gets impacted by the bidding process, whether that also gets impacted by, look, there's a savings if we hire locally too. There's an added value to our environment. There's a cost savings that we're not bringing stuff in from out of state or out of the region. So I'm just highlighting that because this is where I think the perception gets skewed. All right, where's the additional cost, if any? But also, where are those, cost saving may not be the right word, but where are those other mitigating strategies that address any either perceived administrative costs? So I think it would be good to highlight some of those, Alan, in whatever the next iteration of this is, to help us then make an informed decision on the recommendations.
Absolutely, yeah. The cost directly related to a PLA is a very, very hard thing to be able to quantify. And I think there's many studies out there that talk about the increased cost related to PLA, and there's just as many studies that are out there that refute those costs. Right. And so, but we understand that there is this general tendency to increase, but I think what you're getting to is what are we getting for that, and what are the advantages that we get from that, and that's what I tried to discuss earlier. Is we do have a lot of student-related advantages that come from that. So perfect. Yeah, absolutely. So moving on, I just tried to quantify a little bit, put it in numbers, and we talked about project thresholds, and I showed up here just a number of projects that would be applicable to the PLA if we picked a $20 million threshold. Would be about 14 projects, and that would total about $384 million. Doing the math, that shows an impact of somewhere between $30 to about $70 million additional cost. Now, again, we can discuss the 8 to 18%, but it does show that there is a general delta up. We also did the analysis for a $10 million threshold, which would be about 26 projects. $515 million estimated value, somewhere between $41 to about $92 million additional burden to the program. So those are just some factors to consider as we go forward.
Okay. But
So
to piggyback on what Dr. Benitez was saying, this piece is important, what the threshold is. Because we're talking about it being a workforce development program for our students and families. I was recently with the Carpenters and some of their family members, and they are Long Beach people who live here who want to be able to work here. And so as we look at this as a workforce development program for our students, and in the long term, we're gonna train them. They are gonna have not just good paying jobs, but good paying careers. And we, I think, have a responsibility to create the opportunity for them to do that here in Long Beach, so that when they have those careers, they live here in Long Beach, and there's work opportunities for them right here in Long Beach. So this is a piece that I think is really critical.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to get to that point before the graph or the graphic, because the other piece of this is, how do we quantify or qualify what it means to graduate from our district, get trained with one of our labor partners, come back and work at one of the school sites, right, as a product of our district, with a high-paying, benefited, with pension career, so that you could be able to afford to live in Long Beach. right, for that local piece. So, you know, even if it's examples of, you said we looked at other PLAs, I think to me, that helps inform, are we doing $10 million thresholds or $20 million thresholds? Because if I look at the 18%, let's just roll with, okay, it's gonna cost us 18% more. That's substantial, right? The difference in added cost. But if we have no evidence or little evidence or it's perceived evidence that there's an added cost, then that's a different framework that we use to decide whether it's 10 or 20 million. And right now, Alan, quite frankly, and I'm not saying that you're asking us this, it's hard for me to just say, well, the perception is it's gonna cost more, and then use that to differentiate between should we do it at 10 million, 15 million, 20 million, or different than that. So just to add to that it just provides more information for us. Is it closer to 8, closer to 18? If it's neither of those, then what are we using as evidence to make an informed decision? Because in my mind, if the thing here is about adding value, then ultimately this money comes back to our community, right? So it's costing our district. But again, we talk about it all the time. We're also the biggest employer in the city, right? So through our own procurement, we could exemplify what it is to be reinvesting back in our community. So I'm highlighting, again, points that Board Member Kerr made, but I'm highlighting within this is the way these things get framed, right? Through a political lens versus a workforce development, career development, community development lens, that we are the biggest employer and also the biggest investor in terms of value added in our city. So just want to highlight those.
Right, and there's other, I mean, we could go into the extemporaneous things, but when we talk really specifically about folks being able to afford to live in Long Beach these days, this is tough. This kind of career is a mechanism that allows for folks who are here and they're third, fourth, fifth generation Long Beach folks to stay here. But we know there's a climate impact if we say if they can't afford to live here and they move out to the high desert and they're living in Hesperia and they're driving 80 miles each way to come to work on a project here because they can't afford to live here, then we're not creating localized jobs and we're making people live farther away, and that increases greenhouse gases. So it's kind of this big snowball effect of how do we look at this as more than just a numbers thing, because we do want to be really thoughtful, and I am very grateful for the amount of thought and partnership that has gone into this and the negotiation back and forth with our partners. But I think, as you said, it's easy to frame it one way, and I think there's multiple factors in that have been created for reasons outside of our control, that this all contributes to a bigger picture of improving life for Long Beach folks in the long term. So, moving on, sorry.
Okay.
That's it.
So I did want to move on and talk about recommendations, next steps, because we are moving forward pretty quickly with this. So the next steps we're looking at, so we are still just based upon the information we've been able to provide, looking at an applicability of about $20 million and higher projects. The comment I'd make is that we are very much looking at this as a pilot. So a lot of these goals and projects and programs that we're developing are goals, right? And so really, as we work together in the implementation of this agreement, we'll be looking at how do we really address those, community reinvestment goals that we're talking about here, and the ability to how are we impacting the lives of the community that we actually serve. So we are still recommending $20 million and higher construction values, which we're going to convert that into a project list. And this is a mutually preference way of doing it in discussions with the unions. As opposed to establishing a dollar threshold, we actually convert what those are and pick the projects that actually are applicable to that using that threshold. There's a lot that goes into that we could talk about, but it was a preference really of both sides of the negotiation to be able to convert that into a project list. So we want to move forward with finalizing the terms of the PLA. I think we're in version 3 now that we're sharing back and forth, and we're going to continue with that process to be able to finalize the terms of that. We're very much hoping to be able to bring this to you on January 22nd meeting for adoption. There were several questions. We can provide that research and provide that perspective at that meeting, but we do want to bring it back to you for adoption on January 22nd. And it would really become implemented on projects that start as early as summer of 2021. The projects that are scheduled to start this coming summer of 2020, we've kind of like missed the boat on those. Those projects are actually going out to bid as we speak, and most of those contracts will be signed up and in process before we actually finalize the terms of this PLA. So with that, I'm available for any additional questions you may have or any of the other information that we presented today.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, thank you. This is great. I think it's exactly what I thought we were going to get, so it's great. I think, again, the evidence between the 10 million threshold to or the 20 million is if it's solely based on cost, then more information would be helpful for us. The other piece of it is if we use the 20 million, it leaves out a big chunk of our elementary school projects. And I think it's important, right, if we're taking this holistic approach to pilot with some elementary school projects as well. The second part of it is the local hire piece, and we can have a more robust conversation. But within that, one of the things that I had brought up when we initially had the kind of the larger, broader conversation back in March is I think it's also important, just like we included the disadvantaged student piece, to include some disadvantaged worker components, right? So if this 40%, whatever that makeup is going to be of students versus community members, that we also establish at least some parameters around how we're defining disadvantaged students, disadvantaged workers, to include that as part of the 40% conversation. I'd be interested in that. And then lastly, the project list versus the cost threshold, I like that so that we can get a sense of scope and breadth. But again, if we relate it back to, are we talking about $10 million projects, $20 million projects, then it's self-defined and in some ways self-fulfilling in that way. So again, I take it back to just rationale as to why 20 versus 10. And my belief is, we can talk about it when it comes up in January, that we should have elementary schools. The bulk of our schools in the district are elementary schools. So anyways, just a few thoughts moving forward. But awesome job, Alan. And thank you to our labor partners as well for the work.
Thank you.
Additional questions?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Close it
Oh, I just want to say a couple things. One is I want to commend Alan and his team and our labor partners, because if you recall, as Alan's done a great job, we gave a pretty big ask. We had some very specific, detailed things because we want to do this right. And as we talked earlier with our dual immersion discussion, it's really important to go slow to go fast, look at the data and all this business. Because as we're talking about potential costs and potential benefits, there's on the potential benefits side of the house, for example, because we are the largest employer and because roughly 65% of our employees live here, send their children here, we need to, and I'm very supportive of this agreement, but we need to work with our other government agencies to really do a better job of looking at data, because some of the issues, for example, the benefit cost, the same argument we could use against the potential cost, because there's no data really out there. So we really need, for example, how many workers did we bring back that stayed here that are either renting or living and sending their children to school? And so I see this as a huge opportunity, like everything we do as a continuous improvement process, because it doesn't mean that if the board approves such an agreement, and we can look at the name, as long as it's legal, we can change it, I'm sure. It doesn't have to be PLA.
Call it the Chris Steinhauser.
No, don't call it Chris Steinhauser. No, but the issue is that you don't wait till the fifth year to evaluate. It needs to be evaluated on a regular basis. And what I really appreciate what Alan and his team have done too is that in some of these agreements, they talk about zone 1, 2, 3, and 4. Well, local agreement could be from here to Santa Clarita. If you work and live in Santa Clarita, it's like Hesperia. That's, in my opinion, not a local hire. A local hire really is those individuals that live within our zones and where we know our kids come from. So you want to look at all pieces of that. And like you said, Dr. Benitez, we're all these different pieces, you know, and so I just want to commend everybody because I do know how difficult these things are, and the game plan is to bring it back on the 22nd. If we can't, for whatever reason, come to agreement there, February 2nd, I believe, is the next board meeting, because we really want to do this as soon as possible. And I do want to commend everybody. The board, you gave great direction to staff. Staff for working with our partners and for bringing these things back. So I feel very comfortable we're going, you know, you're always going to get criticized no matter what you do in life, but there has been ample time for both sides to bring discussion here. You guys have given great input, and so it's good. I think it will be good for
So the
kids.
superintendent just got me thinking about one other thing, Alan. At some point, I think because we are using where we're at right now with the local hire, slightly above 20%, it would be good for us to look at the methodology by which we collect that data. So as an example, are these the generals that are saying, this is what we hire? Does that include their subs? You know, there's also, this is what you made me think of right now, Mr. Superintendent. What are we using to measure the local hire? Are we using, because this person physically showed up first day on the job, but then someone else came in? Are we using hours devoted to fulfill the local? So I think I don't want to get caught in the weeds here with that, but those are extremely important so that then when folks then look at it through a critical lens, it's like, well, what does local really mean, right? It's someone brought on the first day, we fulfill it, and then what happens after the fact? So all these things I think are in the details of upholding the value. Right, that was trying to espouse here. And at the end of the day, for me, it is a community development, community workforce development a strategy. So I can bother you with the details between now and our January meeting.
I do have a quick answer to your question about how we extract that data. So every worker that works on our project has to turn in, or the employer has to turn in what are called certified labor reports that actually are turned into the state. So we extract their address to where they're domiciled from those LCPs, those labor reports. So those are all based on the hours that they work. So if you work a single hour, you have to be on a certified labor report, and that's where we extract that information from. So it's as accurate as we can get.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Any other questions? Alan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our labor partners, thank you for your comments as well. Much appreciated.